Welcome to the Missouri Clean Skies podcast. And today we have two state representatives from the state of Missouri. We have Representative Steve Jordan, and then we also have Representative Mazzie Christensen. Our number one goal is to ban geoengineering in the state of Missouri. What we're trying to do is build a coalition of people who's really going to push this through the House and through the Senate. So, Steve, you were the first person that I contacted because the first thing right out of the bat, we said, oh, look who has a legislation already. So it's okay if we start right there. Steve, tell us how that came about. How did you decide that you wanted to have a bill?
Well, 4 or 5 years ago, I kept seeing these clouds that I had never seen. And I'm an old guy. I'm 68 years old. I mean, clouds that I've never seen formed the way they were formed. And then the more I got to looking, the more I got to seeing tic-tac-toe boards put up in the sky. And then after a few hours, those things would all come together and make a solid cloud cover. And they would just linger for days. Uh, and I'm not a scientist by any means, but when you see something like that, there's something up.
So, Maisie, can you give us some background on your knowledge of this and maybe why it's something that's important to you?
Yeah, thank you again for having me on. I think like Steve, Steve was actually one of the first members of the House to actually file this legislation. I've always been a supporter of figuring out what's going on. And I think that's half the battle, right? Is having these discussions, being open, being honest, and trying to figure out, what's the root cause. We've always called them chemtrails. And that's always, I think, been a topic of discussion or amongst like my constituents. Um, I would say really what kind of pushed me more towards, something that's going on is I'm really big into water, knowing what's in our water, what's being put in our water. And that also goes into what's being put in our soil. And I had a constituent have their soil tested in my district, and we were trying to figure out what was going on. And it was interesting. The feedback came in, and they had a high amount of metal in their soil. And the company was like, "Have you ever had, a house here? What has been done?" And it's only been farm ground. And so the company was like, "Well, maybe, it's part of the chemtrails because they do release a lot of metals, aluminum, which also goes into our soil." And so it kind of goes on the lines of, I would say the make Missouri, healthy again, make the US healthy again. And that's kind of like the same notion, right? We want to know what's in our food. We want to know what's in our water system. Everything that, is coming up is going down as well. And that's where our food comes from, what we drink and everything else. And so I think it really kind of all comes together, right, with the new movement that's going on. So that's really where I kind of came in and had some interest for sure.
Bottom line is, no matter what, it's not something that we should be having in our soil and our food. If it is happening, and they're saying it is, then we need to stop it. And here's the other thing: we know that they, as in the scientists and the universities and things like that, they plan to increase this significantly.
Yeah, so what we have been finding, we already knew that America's universities have been completely radicalized and are totally unhinged, and that's a different podcast. However, they're really tied up in the geoengineering world. And one of the things that Cornell University has suggested is that rather than just injecting aerosols into our atmosphere or stratosphere with planes, they would just like to put a permanent hose up into the upper atmosphere. It wasn't a really detailed article, but it talked about injecting sulfur dioxide, I believe, or was it sulfuric acid? It was one of the two.
It's the same thing. Yeah.
And that it was one of the proposed ways to mitigate cooling of the planet, or rather to fight against global warming. And so these kinds of ideas are coming out of our universities. And we did a big post a couple of weeks ago on X. There's a campaign to get funding through the University of Oklahoma, or one of the universities in Oklahoma. It's a multi-million-dollar petition for funds so that they can continue dumping money into the geoengineering machines. So not only is geoengineering wrapped up in 15 federal agencies, it's coming through the places that we're sending our kids to school. And of course, our taxes go to these agencies and these universities as well. So it's so deep. It's such a messy web, but we're slowly unraveling it.
All this stuff doesn't come out of nowhere. Like if Lee Zeldin says that it's happening and it does exist. It came from some scientist, right? Somebody had the idea that we should spray the stratosphere with aluminum, barium, strontium, nanoparticles, particulates to reflect the sun to save us from global warming. And it's the whole climate change cartels that are pushing this on us and our public, and they're not going to stop until somebody steps up. So we're looking at having a bill in the Senate, and we're working on the draft, but we want you to have it and run it into the House. Steve, are you on board with that?
Sir, I want to get this thing done.
Well, Mazzie, how about you?
Hey, I'm all about supporting Steve. Steve was the first one that filed this legislation, and I'm happy to help him and co-sponsor it and do everything I can do to help.
What do you expect from your colleagues? Do you think you're going to get the support that you need to get some traction here?
I think we'll have support from our colleagues. There was already a couple guys that had co-sponsored the bill, and I think we'll have a lot more get on board because they've realized this is a real thing now. It's not just some conspiracy theory.
I actually had two legislators pull me aside last year and asked about Steve's legislation. They were like, I'm getting a lot of calls from constituents about it. Like, what do you know? And so I kind of just ran him through it. And the whole thought process, right, is if it's not happening, that's fine. But this legislation would be fine to have then if it's not happening, and vice versa. If it is happening, we should be doing something about it. And it seemed really, they were really open-minded about it. They came and asked me about it. Which I didn't even have the legislation. So I think, a lot of people do want to know about it. And a lot of it is just learning and teaching, right? I think most of the times when you file a piece of legislation, it's almost a miracle if you can get it right from point A to point B to the Senate and then point C to the governor. And so you have to get the Speaker of the House on board because he's the one he's one that puts it to committee. There's nobody else that can do it. It's only him. And so that's your first step. And then we got to get the chair of the committee to bring it up to do a hearing. And then you got to, go back to them. And then since we have rules committees, then we got to try to, get the rules committee to bring it up, to vote for it. And then we got to get to the floor leader, right? And the floor leader has to put it up. And so there is 1,000 different steps, of course, on purpose. But things do happen. And also you can always file amendments on the floor. There's always a farm bill of some sort that you could put this on. You can talk about it. I always say amendments are king. Most of the legislation I've ever passed is through the amendment process, and that's just putting an amendment on the floor. And so there's so many different avenues. And I think the more education and the more teaching that we do to legislators or even people in the room is always beneficial to have the discussion. And Steve does a really good job as well as talking to legislators, and from the background that he comes from also gives him a leg up in that as well.
Wow, that sounds complicated. It sounds overwhelming to me, but it is possible. Things do happen. And so do you think that the Speaker of the House what is his take on this? Any idea?
I'm not sure. I haven't spoke to, Speaker Patterson about this very issue, but I would say, next year, I wouldn't be surprised if he would maybe put it to committee to have the discussion. But you'll never, we don't know. It's solely up to him. He put my bill, it was a labeling bill that Representative Keith Elliott and I had, which is just like, it was like a resolution about labeling meat and where it comes from. And they put that to committee to have a discussion. And that is not a very well liked bill by the lobby corps. And so you just never know.
Well, here's the deal. We have at least 38 states that I know of that have legislation in the works. Now, we've already had 2 already that have passed legislation, as you know, Tennessee and Florida. And so then Texas, my home state, is also in committee right now. We're watching those hearings go down. I'm telling you, the momentum is on our side right now. As you said, if nothing else, take it to committee so we can have a discussion about it.
Right.
Because we need a fair opportunity to say, look, the people are demanding this. Is there something that we can do that the people listening to this can do to help us in this process? What do you suggest people do, Steve?
Well, I think the biggest thing is they can get hold of the speaker, they can get hold of their legislatures in their areas, urge them to get behind this, Senate and House members as well. Uh, and also, it doesn't hurt to rattle the governor. He swings a pretty big stick, and also the speaker's office.
So how do you contact the governor and the speaker if you're someone that doesn't know?
Well, the emails and phone numbers are public information.
Okay.
I have that in front of me, but the squeaky wheel will get the oil most of the time.
Mhm.
Okay. So what we need to do is we need to rally the troops, and we've been doing this, Steve. We actually have it on our website and mocleanskies.org. You can go on there and go to our resources page. Actually, it's on the front page. You don't even have to go to the resources page. And it says contact my legislators. And it makes it super easy because all you have to do is click a few buttons and you just read what it already says. And if you agree, then hit send, and there you go.
My best take is always put a little something special from you and how you want it. Most legislators I've talked to don't respond to automated emails. I will say sometimes when you get like 1,000 of the same emails, you kind of wonder, do people care about this? Is it just copy and paste? But put a little bit of your own spin. If you care about this issue and you want it done, take what they say, but put something else in there that, is maybe more personal. So they know that it's not just a copy and paste sent. It's something that really is near and dear to your heart, and you get a better result. You get a better answer as well.
That is a great point. That is a really good point because all of our efforts, we don't see things from your point of view, and that is a perfect example.
I also think with Marjorie Taylor Greene and Mr. Kennedy on board with this thing, it's going to make it a lot more visible to the average person.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody knows about this Marjorie Taylor Greene. I've never heard of. No, I'm just kidding. But somebody here on this podcast is more familiar with her than us. So, anybody want to volunteer that information? What do you think?
No, he's choosing.
She's obviously this is a near and dear to her. So tell us about that, Mazzie.
Yeah, Marjorie Taylor Greene is by far one of the most honest, caring, like straightforward politicians I've ever met. And I sincerely, mean that. And anyone that's met her definitely gets that vibe. Most of the time you meet people that you see on TV, and it's always very disappointing because they very much are every bit of politician that you normally see. But Marjorie Taylor Greene is not. She's someone that's not bought and paid for, and I've always really appreciated that about her. I do know genuinely that every issue that she talks about, it's not because someone's paid her to talk about it. It's something that is really like near and dear to her. And she's as genuine as it comes. I know people always talk about how crazy, she is, but really she's not. She's really funny. She's very intelligent. And I always just kind of remember one thing that I remember with Marjorie Taylor Greene is she didn't need this job in Congress. She had a lot of money before she was elected into office, and she had a wonderful life. She has brilliant children. She is the epitome of the American dream. And so I'm glad to hear that she's been talking about this.
Now is a good time to really push this forward because we have momentum on our side, and education is key. Bringing it up to people, the representatives, your local representative, your local senator, all the way up to the Speaker of the House and the governor. We have to make this a priority. It's the people. If the people speak up, then that's when your legislators will listen. If you're not going to speak up about it, then nothing's going to change.
I wanted to know what you guys think the biggest objections will be from maybe even people who are aligned with your political views or people across the aisle. Where do you think we're going to run into the most objections?
The biggest objection, I'm not entirely sure. Sometimes you can get the biggest objections once you get to committee, and that's when you kind of always know who's against what. I mean, I could see the biggest thing is people not thinking it's a big deal. Maybe, I don't know. I haven't heard a ton, or maybe that's made up. I think that's the biggest thing. But I mean, as you've seen throughout the years, of course, it's not made up. A lot of it is just people don't understand that this has been being used for a long time. I really, personally, when I think I was in California, I was going through some of the farming industry there. And I didn't even know for like grapes, they actually have machines that they think it's going to storm that will actually shoot up into the clouds to move them away from their grapes. So they don't get hail damage. So they don't get certain types of rain that's going to harm their grapes. And I was like, what? Like, you can do that? A lot of people just don't know that. And so I think a lot of the opposition is just going to be people thinking, this isn't true. Why do you need to do it? And that's when you combat with, okay, if it's not real, if this isn't a thing, then legislation's not going to hurt, right? But that's really the only thing I can think of. But gosh, I mean, when you get to committee, you start turning around when people are in opposition, like, what? Like, I didn't know that you were against this. So I don't know. I haven't heard too much. Most people just want to know more about it.
I have had a few other legislators that say that this is not real. Again, education, and now that the federal government has basically admitted that it's been going on and they're funding it, I think that's going to help us with our legislators prove that it is happening.
And like Mazzie said, hey, if it's not happening, then there's no harm in banning it. And
Yep.
That's what Senator Moon says. And so that's a good point. If there's no harm in banning it if it doesn't happen, then, but a lot of people do say that it is, including the EPA and the federal government. So take them at their word. Take them and here's the thing, again, if we don't stop them now, we're going to wish that we had, because in the future, we won't see the sun ever, because what they want to do is block out the sun permanently. Okay. They want, and the science says that it's actually having the opposite effect, that when you have tremendous, they call the persistent contrails, when they persist over the sky, do you notice that it feels a lot harder? It's like putting, it's like being in a pressure cooker. When you put the lid on, it gets harder, right? When you take the lid off, it cools down. It's the same thing. And so it's having the opposite effect. Mm-hmm. And the scientists are, again, they're beating the climate change drum, and they're going to get their way one way or another, and until somebody steps up and stops them. And there's plenty of evidence. It's well documented on paper, on video, in the institutions, all of our universities who are studying these things. Mm-hmm. It's all out there, like the recent Cornell University study where they're going to put a hose in the sky. They're not studying this to say, oh, this is just for fun. They're studying this to say, we're going to do this to mitigate climate change. We are. That's the plan. And these are globalist people that, we all know they have other plans for human beings, I think. But it's up to us to stop this. And the other thing, the cloud seeding is a whole nother thing. It's not right we've got two different things going on here. And what we're looking at is to stop weather manipulation of all kinds. Okay. Stop it. And that includes solar radiation management, stratospheric aerosol injections. That's one side of the coin. But you also have the cloud seeding part. And they have different types of planes at different altitudes and for different purposes. And those guys are literally flying into the clouds to make them rain. That's their purpose. And it's a good thing. We need to do that because the farmer needs rain. Well, how is it that a farmer that can afford that can hire you to go over a cloud and spray toxins, and it is toxins, into a cloud to make it rain for one person, and therefore, what does that do downwind? What happens to the other farmers who needed that rain? Well, when you manipulate Mother Nature or play God with the weather, right? We get catastrophic consequences, and we're seeing that. What we're seeing in the climate, yes, the climate has changes because the climate is being changed. It's being manipulated, and it needs to stop. Arrogant people who think that they can control the weather is causing all kinds of problems.
That's the biggest concern that my people have asked me. Why are we doing this? They're manipulating the weather. This is not normal weather change. They're causing the weather to be changed so they can extort more tax money out of us to continue with this madness, as far as I'm concerned. And most of the people I talk to feel the same way I do about this.
We are sending FOIA requests to all the agencies, the federal agencies and the state agencies, to say, what is it that you're doing? What we need to know, freedom of information, know exactly what you are doing. And that's the stage that we're in right now with them. And I'm going to send you guys some flyers, that little cards that says, how can people get involved in this? How can they, how can they get involved, and what they can do, and just let them know that we're looking for, transparency from our government. What are you doing, and what's happening? Whether they respond or not is different. We have to start there. I can't tell you enough how much we appreciate the two of you, and we're just honored to be partnering with you guys. And so, if there's anything that we can do for you guys, we're here for that. So, we'll be in touch with you really soon, and we're really looking forward to this. And thank you again for what you're doing.
Yeah, thank you guys so much. I appreciate it.
Thank each of y'all, and I appreciate your time.